Not a chance. That's the message Ukraine just delivered loud and clear to Vladimir Putin after he floated the idea of a 3-day ceasefire, conveniently timed to line up with his grand military parade. But Ukraine's not buying it. Putin has pulled this move before. Offer a temporary truce, only to break it hours later. This time, Ukraine isn't playing along. They've seen this game. And this time, they're making it crystal clear. Putin's May 9th parade won't be safe. In fact, it might just be the bullseye. Now here's the backdrop. Russia's so-called Victory Day parade is scheduled for May 9th, meant to celebrate the Soviet Union's win in World War II. It's a flashy, annual event full of tanks, soldiers, and patriotic pageantry. But let's be real. It's not about honoring history anymore. It's a PR stunt, a show of strength from a leader trying to distract from a war that's gone sideways. And while Putin is gearing up for his big day, Ukraine's still fighting for its survival. Cities are under fire. Civilians are suffering. Why on earth would President Zelensky agree to pause the defense of his country just so Putin can roll out the red carpet? He won't. That's why Ukraine's response is turning heads. No ceasefire, no celebrations for Putin, no letting up, especially not now. Putin may have hoped to hit pause, take a victory lap, and control the narrative. But Ukraine just flipped the script. And you better believe they have their reasons. We'll break those down in just a second. For now, both Ukraine and Russia are talking plenty about this so-called parade ceasefire. But their tones couldn't be more different. When Putin first floated the idea of a 3-day pause in fighting, conveniently wrapped around his big May 9th parade, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky didn't even blink. He shut it down instantly, calling it what it was: a performance, a political stunt, a desperate grab at good press, likely aimed at impressing the West, especially the US. Zelensky laid it out plain and simple. They kill until the 7th, take a comfy little break, and then go right back to killing on the 11th. Put that in perspective, and Putin's pitch looks less like a peace offering and more like an ego trip. Ukraine's not fooled, and they're certainly not buying the idea that this brief pause is some kind of humanitarian truce. After all, they've heard that song before. Zelensky reminded the world that earlier this year, Ukraine had already agreed, with US backing, to a full 30-day ceasefire. What did Russia do? Pretended to consider it, then spent the next 50 days twisting it to fit their own agenda. Now Putin wants just 3 days. That's not a peace plan. It's an insult. Zelensky made it crystal clear. Ukraine is only interested in serious, unconditional ceasefires, not PR breaks for military parades. Yes, let's try 30 days, he said, because you can't build any plan for ending this war in 3, 5, or 7 days. That one line speaks volumes. To Ukraine, and likely to the US as well, a real ceasefire means pressing pause long enough to sit down, negotiate, and actually work toward peace. Putin, he just wants a breather. A gap in the war long enough to wave flags and flex military muscle for the cameras, before diving right back into the bloodshed. Zelensky summed it up best. This isn't peace, it's theater. And Ukraine? They're not giving him the stage. Zelensky isn't just calling out Putin's 3-day ceasefire proposal, he's exposing the holes in it. One of the biggest? There's zero mention of monitoring or oversight. No international observers. No neutral verification. Just Putin saying, "Trust me." And Zelensky's response? Not a chance. In fact, Zelensky went further, saying he'd still be open to a serious 30-day ceasefire, even starting on the same date Putin proposed. But Russia hasn't shown the slightest interest in that. So Ukraine's position is crystal clear. There will be no ceasefire, just so Putin can play dress-up and throw himself a parade. And that's not sitting well in Moscow. Russia's foreign ministry spokesperson, Maria Zakharova, lashed out, accusing Zelensky of literally planning terrorist attacks on air. It's the kind of rhetoric we've come to expect, but it still shows how rattled the Kremlin is. Other Russian officials piled on, accusing Zelensky of trying to ruin their moment in the spotlight. Zelensky wasn't fazed. He clapped back, saying Russia's worried about whether they can host a parade, when what they should be worried about is the fact that this brutal war is still far from over. Even Putin's longtime spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, jumped into the fray. His comment? Zelensky makes many statements, most of them unsuccessful. There will be a parade, and you and I will proudly watch it. Sounds defensive? That's because it is. So let's break this down. Why did Zelensky shoot down Putin's proposal so quickly? And why does it matter? Here's what Putin offered: a 72-hour ceasefire, starting May 8th and ending May 10th. The excuse? To mark the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II and allow Russia to stage its iconic May 9th military parade without fear of attack. But for Ukraine, this wasn't about peace. It was about optics, a photo op for Putin, while his troops continue to attack Ukrainian cities before and after the break. That's why Zelensky said no. Because in Ukraine's eyes, a ceasefire isn't a pause for celebration. It's a window for diplomacy, for real progress. Not a break so Putin can roll tanks through Moscow and call it victory. When Putin pitched that 3-day ceasefire proposal, he made it sound like all hostilities would come to a halt. Russia expected Ukraine to follow suit. But right from the start, Russia was already trying to twist the narrative. How? Well, the Kremlin quickly made it clear that if Ukraine decided to break the ceasefire during Russia's weekend celebrations, they'd respond adequately and effectively. Zelensky wasn't buying it. He called for a full 30-day ceasefire, but Russia wasn't even considering that option. Instead, Putin's only goal seemed to be halting the fighting long enough to parade through Moscow. But there's a reason Ukraine isn't taking this ceasefire seriously. It's happened before, and it didn't end well for Ukraine. Remember back in April when Putin offered a 3-day ceasefire for Easter? At first, Ukraine didn't rush to dismiss it. They thought maybe, if Putin really meant it, they'd go along with it. But they also kept one eye open, ready to react if Russia broke the agreement. Guess what happened? Within hours of declaring the ceasefire, Russian forces were back at it, launching attacks. Zelensky even wrote on Telegram, "We can say that Russia is trying to create the impression of a ceasefire, but in reality, it's still making moves to advance and cause losses." By the time the supposed truce was over, Russia had launched nearly 3,000 attacks. And that wasn't all. They also violated previous ceasefires, ones designed to protect the Black Sea and Ukraine's energy infrastructure. For Ukraine, the message is clear. Putin can't be trusted. And after that broken promise, Zelensky isn't about to let Putin have a free pass for a parade. The clock's ticking. But Ukraine knows better than to believe in a ceasefire from Russia. If anyone still needed proof that Russia isn't serious about stopping the fighting, Putin made it crystal clear over Easter. No matter what he says, he's going to keep ordering his troops to attack Ukraine. So when Putin talks about halting the violence for a parade, Ukraine isn't buying it. Look back just a couple of weeks to see exactly how hollow Putin's claims of wanting peace really are. His Easter ceasefire was nothing more than a strategic move, a gambit that backfired in spectacular fashion. According to the Atlantic Council, Putin was trying to paint Ukraine as the main roadblock to peace. His plan was simple: declare a ceasefire without any input from Ukraine or the US. Then, when the ceasefire inevitably failed, he could blame Ukraine for breaking it. He'd have the perfect excuse to say, "Ukraine attacked, so we had no choice but to retaliate." But Putin didn't expect Zelensky to call his bluff. When Ukraine's president agreed to observe the ceasefire, but only if Russia did too, Putin's plan fell apart. Ukraine wasn't going to be the one to break it. Zelensky then upped the ante by proposing a 30-day ceasefire, which totally wrecked Putin's narrative. Putin wanted to look like he was moving toward peace for the US's sake, but his real goal was to make Ukraine seem like the aggressor. It was a cynical play, but Ukraine saw right through it. Fast forward to now, and Putin's trying again with the May ceasefire, but this time Ukraine and the US aren't so easily fooled. So, why does Russia really want this May ceasefire? Putin claims it's for humanitarian reasons, but the truth is, it's all about the parade. This parade is a huge event for Russia, but it also happens to be a major target for Ukraine. The humanitarian angle Putin keeps pushing, that's just a smokescreen. The real humanitarian concern is that regular Russian citizens will be there, and Putin is using them as pawns in his game, an excuse to push his own agenda while the world watches. Ukraine isn't about to let Putin use them, or the global stage, as pawns. The stakes are high, and Ukraine is wise to the game he's playing. Russia's leader, Vladimir Putin, seems to be hoping for Ukraine to strike during his grand military parade. Why? Because he knows that an attack on such an event would almost certainly result in civilian casualties, and that would give him the perfect chance to paint Ukraine's President Zelensky and his forces as terrorists. Maria Zakharova, a key Russian spokesperson, practically spilled the beans when she declared that Russia would consider any attack from Ukraine on May 9th as an act of terrorism. But what she was really trying to do was shift the narrative. Russia wants the US to see Ukraine as the aggressor, unwilling to end the war. It's all part of a larger game of manipulation aimed at winning over global public opinion. And here's the catch: it's not going to work. Let's rewind a bit to when Putin broke his own Easter ceasefire agreement. Just as the Atlantic Council pointed out, at a critical moment when the US was trying to broker peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. The US had already floated a ceasefire proposal, one that Ukraine was on board with. But Russia wasn't having it. They blocked every attempt to make it happen, all to put US President Donald Trump in a difficult spot. What started as an effort to paint Ukraine as the bad guys quickly backfired, with growing voices in the US calling on Trump to hold Putin accountable for his bad faith tactics. And it looks like Trump has been paying attention. When Putin launched his Easter offensive, Trump didn't hold back. He took to his Truth Social platform, condemning Russia's actions and questioning Putin's true intentions. "There's no reason for Russia to be attacking civilian areas," Trump said, referring to the missiles targeting cities and towns over the past few days. "It makes me think that maybe he doesn't want to stop the war. He's just stringing me along. We need to deal with him differently, through banking or secondary sanctions. Too many people are dying." Putin's attempt to manipulate Trump failed. The US president saw right through it. Fast forward to now, with Putin proposing another pause, this time for the May parade, and it's clear he's at it again, trying to make it seem like Ukraine is the one stoking the flames of conflict. But this time, Trump isn't biting. Right after Putin's 3-day ceasefire proposal was announced, White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt shared Trump's stance loud and clear. The president has been crystal clear. He wants to see a permanent ceasefire, and he wants it now to end the bloodshed and the killing. White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt told reporters that the president is growing more and more frustrated with both sides. In the past, when Trump mentioned both Russia and Ukraine, it might have sounded like he was blaming both for the failure to reach a peace deal. Trump's words now seem like he's tossing Putin a tiny bone, letting Russia's leader think he still has some influence. But here's the reality. The US knows better than to trust Putin's promises. They're fully aware that Russia isn't stopping anytime soon. The US expects Russia to keep up its attacks, and Ukraine will continue to have every right to fight back. Putin's PR stunt, just like his previous attempts to manipulate the US, isn't working. Trump sees right through it, and the BBC reports that he's quickly running out of patience. But we should also consider that there might be another reason why Putin is calling for this May ceasefire. Here's the harsh truth. Putin is in trouble. Russia is on the defensive in this war, and it's not looking good for them. According to Pravda, Putin has already lost 160,000 soldiers, dead, wounded, or captured, in just the first 4 months of 2025. If this pace continues, Russia could lose up to 480,000 soldiers by the end of the year. As of now, Euromaidan Press reports that total Russian casualties from the invasion are approaching 950,000. By the end of May, that number could easily cross the 1 million mark. And here's the kicker. All these staggering losses are being traded for very little gain in Ukraine. In April, Russia made a modest gain of just 68 square miles in Ukraine, but it came at a devastating cost. Around 36,000 Russian soldiers were lost, which breaks down to roughly 529 soldiers for every square mile gained. That tells us one very clear thing. Russia's military is taking heavy losses, and those losses shed new light on Putin's request for a ceasefire. Could it be that he's desperately trying to buy some time just to give his struggling forces a chance to regroup and catch their breath? Sure, a brief pause would also give Ukraine's soldiers a break, but let's be real. 3 days is barely enough time to reposition troops or launch a fresh assault. So why the sudden push for a ceasefire? Part of it could be Putin's ego, wanting a moment to celebrate his grand parade, but it's also likely a strategic move, a way to manipulate the US and the world into thinking Russia is still in control. The truth is, his military isn't performing anywhere near as well as he's been letting on. Putin may just be playing for time, trying to regain his footing. However, Ukraine isn't buying it. President Zelensky has made it crystal clear that Russia's parade won't be safe. So, what comes next? Well, no matter what, Russia is pressing forward with its parade plans, even though they're in the middle of a war. That's a bold move, and one that might surprise some, considering the stakes. In the past, Russia has poured billions of rubles into making these Victory Day parades a spectacle. Take the 2019 parade, for example. It cost around $5.5 million. Given that this year marks the 80th anniversary of the Soviet Union's role in World War II, it wouldn't be a stretch to think Putin will go even bigger. Despite the heavy toll the war has taken on Russia's financial reserves. But here's the thing. Ukraine has a real opportunity to hit back hard. The soldiers marching in the parade are sitting ducks, and any of the military equipment Russia rolls out could become a target. Even Putin himself could be in the crosshairs. It's clear that Ukraine has every reason to disrupt Russia's show, and the stakes are higher than ever. Right now, it's unclear whether Putin himself will show up or speak at the Victory Day parade. But if he does, Ukraine might see that as the perfect opportunity to strike, potentially launching drones or missiles, targeting the parade as a way to send a message and deal a blow to Russia. Even if that doesn't happen, one thing is for sure: the parade won't be as impressive on the global stage as it has been in previous years. While the event will feature a few world leaders, including China's President Xi Jinping, it's clear that much of Europe and the nations that once backed Russia during World War II aren't interested in attending. The only European Union leader making an appearance is Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico, and he's already facing a lot of criticism for it. Putin, though, is likely hoping the presence of these global figures will deter Ukraine from making a move against the parade. But will it? Time will tell. What's almost certain is that the fighting in Ukraine won't stop. Russia will keep up its attacks, and Ukraine will continue defending its territory, launching counterattacks whether or not they target the parade itself. Meanwhile, Putin's plan to use the parade and the potential ceasefire to manipulate the US won't work. On May 4th, Trump gave an interview in which he was asked about a new sanctions bill proposed by his ally, Senator Lindsey Graham. When asked if he would sign it, Trump responded that it would depend on whether or not Russia was genuinely committed to peace. That's a clear warning to Putin. The US isn't buying into his ceasefire games. They don't believe he'll stick to his word, but they'll be watching his every move. If Putin backs out of the deal he's supposedly trying to negotiate, the US could come down hard with a new round of sanctions that could cripple Russia. According to the Kyiv Independence, Lindsey Graham's sanctions bill already has support from at least 72 senators, and if it passes, it's expected to deliver a serious blow to Russia's economy. If Trump signs off on this, which seems more likely as he's growing increasingly frustrated with Putin, it will probably be because Russia failed to follow through on the supposed 3-day ceasefire Putin claimed to want. One thing's for sure, though: Russia's May 9th military parade won't be safe. Zelensky has made that point loud and clear, and it's a message that comes at a time when Ukraine has strong backing from the US, while Putin's attempts to manipulate the ceasefire narrative have fallen flat. We'll have to wait until May 9th to see what actually happens, but in the meantime, let's hear your thoughts. Is Ukraine right to reject Putin's 3-day truce just so Russia can have its parade? Do you think Ukraine will directly target the parade, or will they take advantage of Russia's distraction to hit other important targets? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more up-to-the-minute analysis on the Ukraine conflict.